This story is not just about a canceled trip, but about the journey to reclaim self-worth and dignity after being betrayed by family. Evelyn devoted her youth to nurturing her family, but when those sacrifices went unappreciated, she was forced to set boundaries to protect herself. Sometimes, love alone isn't enough to hold a family together. True freedom begins when we learn to let go of what no longer belongs to us. Before we dive into her story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. I never imagined the day would come when my own son would tell me I wasn't part of the family anymore. But here I am, sitting alone in my cozy little house in Port Townsend, Washington, trying to make sense of a 3-year dream that vanished in a single text message. For years, I had quietly saved and planned a special trip to Hawaii for my family. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a promise I made to my late husband, James, the love of my life. We'd honeymooned there long ago, young and hopeful, sharing a single suitcase and sandwiches, laughing under the Hawaiian sun. James loved the beach so much, and I always dreamed that one day I could bring our family there to share that joy, to create new memories with our children and grandchildren. I started saving little by little, stuffing cash into what I called my dream jar hidden behind the kitchen cabinet. I sold old furniture, tutored English lessons online at night, and skipped small luxuries like my favorite tea or the cable subscription. Every penny was carefully tucked away for that trip. I researched the perfect beachfront villa, made countless calls to travel agents, ensuring the beds would be soft enough for the kids, the walkways smooth for Jessica's mother's bad knee. I even ordered custom t-shirts that read "Family is Forever 2023, embroidered with each grandchild's name. I was so excited to see my family under the Hawaiian sky, lighting candles around a fire pit, holding a photo of James as we shared stories about him. I imagined my grandson's small hand in mine, asking if Grandpa loved the beach too. I would say yes, more than anything, because he brought me here. But then the message came. "You won't be joining us. My wife wants to keep this trip just for her family." Michael texted me one evening, right after I'd finished packing sunscreen bottles labeled for each grandchild. "You've already done your part by paying." Those words didn't just sting, they shattered something deep inside me. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the quiet house. My hands were sticky from wrapping little souvenir bags. I stared at the glowing screen until it went dark, then placed the phone face down, refusing to reply. It wasn't the first sign that things were changing between us. Jessica's cold corrections in front of the kids, the way she'd roll her eyes when I told stories about our honeymoon, or how she started hosting holidays at her mother's house without telling me until the last minute. But to be told outright that I wasn't welcome, not even as the one who had paid for everything that was different, it was final. Memories flooded me. The Mother's Day cards Michael once wrote that made me cry, the pink tulips he brought every March even after moving away, the picture he drew of me in 2nd grade with a cape, captioned, "My mom saves the day." Now, it seemed, I was no longer part of that story. That night, I opened my laptop and looked at the travel fund account I'd built so carefully over the years. Over $21,000, the result of years of sacrifice and quiet hope. My fingers hovered over the freeze account button. One click could pause all payments, stop the linked cards from working, and bring their plans crashing down. But I didn't click yet. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing a new list names of women like me. Women who had been overlooked, underestimated, and left behind. Margaret, who hadn't left the state in 20 years. Susan, whose children hadn't visited since her cancer diagnosis. Linda, who helped raise grandchildren but wasn't invited to graduations. I saved the file and went back to the bank page. Then I clicked freeze. The account locked. No warning, no alert, just silence. Over the next days, Michael and Jessica's texts and calls flooded in, begging, pleading, but I said nothing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was free. And I realized this trip wasn't really about us as a family. It was about money and control. They wanted my sacrifice, but not my presence. So I took the money back, not to punish, but to empower. I invited those forgotten women instead. We traveled together, laughed, shared stories, and found strength in each other's company. No pretense, no judgment, just acceptance and love. One night, around a table in that villa by the ocean, we lit candles for those we had lost and those who never saw their worth. I looked around at these remarkable women and thought, this is family. Not the one we're born into, but the one we choose. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. The days leading up to the trip felt heavy, each moment a quiet reminder of the widening distance between Evelyn and her family. Invitations came not in words, but in absence, a new pattern she had begun to recognize. At Thanksgiving, Evelyn noticed the photos. When the family posed for pictures, Laura would say, "Let's do one of just the kids," or "Let's do one with our little family unit." Gradually, Evelyn's presence faded like a fading photograph, blurred at the edges, overlooked by those closest to her. Christmas was no different. The family wore matching red sweaters decorated with white trees, but Evelyn's sweater was blue. She wasn't even asked if she wanted one like theirs. When she arrived for the holiday, Laura introduced her coolly. "Michael's mom is here too," as if Evelyn had wandered in by mistake. Birthdays became another signpost on the road of exclusion. Laura took over all the celebrations, hosting them at her mother's house. Evelyn was invited, but she felt like a guest, never the heart of the gathering. It was a slow, steady erasure. Evelyn held on to the hope that the Maui trip would bring them back together. She imagined them all beneath the wide Hawaiian sky, waves whispering against the shore, children laughing in the sand. She thought maybe love would be enough to remind Michael and Laura where they came from, who loved them first. But the text she received 2 nights before the trip shattered that dream in seconds. Every skipped cup of tea, every cold night, every hour spent tutoring students on a glowing screen suddenly felt like a foolish sacrifice. She hadn't been building a bridge. She had been building a pedestal, one they never planned to visit. The candle she had packed, lavender-scented, waited in her bag. She had planned to light it by the fire pit, to hold James's photo as everyone said something good about him. Instead, the flame would burn only in her heart. She thought about Michael's words. "You've already done your part by paying." They had not wanted her stories, her memories, or her presence. They only wanted her money, and once they had it, they wanted her to disappear. That night, Evelyn sat in the dim kitchen light, staring out the window at the birdbath James had installed 20 years ago. The water was still. So was she. She wasn't angry, not shocked, just still. The next morning, she woke early, unable to sleep. She moved through the house like a ghost, folding the same blanket twice, wiping counters that were already spotless. The silence clung to her like a second skin. Later, an email arrived, the final confirmation from the travel agency. 8 names. No Evelyn Parker. No guest 9. No special arrangement. No place for her. She closed her laptop gently, like it might break if she moved too fast. Laura called that evening, her voice overly bright, too rehearsed. "We've got everything handled, Evelyn. You don't need to worry. Maybe it's best you stay home, rest." Evelyn listened to the rehearsed kindness that was anything but kind. After the call, she opened her fireproof box, a small lockbox beneath her bed, and pulled out documents proving her sole ownership of the travel fund. The account, the cards, the payments, all hers. She looked at the screen again. The travel fund still had $21,000, $763 and some change. All active, all under her control. She realized just how easily they had erased her, how confidently they had spent her generosity like it was owed, and discarded her like a burden. But banks could close. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. That night, Evelyn didn't make any rash decisions. She brewed herself a cup of peppermint tea, the warmth comforting in the stillness of the room. The phone was silent. No calls, no messages. Just the gentle tapping of the wind against the window pane and the soft hum of the refrigerator. She let herself feel the full weight of the moment, not just the sting of rejection, but the sharp clarity that came with it. They hadn't forgotten her. They had deliberately left her out. And worse, they thought she would accept it quietly. But Evelyn was no longer the silent, grateful mother or grandmother. She was a woman who had spent years giving without being seen, loving without receiving. She opened her laptop again and pulled up the travel fund account. Her name was at the top as the sole owner. Linked cards for the villa, car rental, airline, and excursions all pulled from her fund. Her finger hovered over the toggle switch marked freeze mode. Just one click would pause all charges and disable the linked cards. Yet she didn't click it, not yet. Instead, she opened her calendar and marked the departure day with a red circle. She knew exactly when the freeze should start, just as her family queued up at the gate, confident everything was paid for. She sent one last soft message to Michael. "Let me know if you want me to bring anything for the kids' motion sickness bands or snacks." No reply. She watched the read receipt with a quiet acceptance. There would be no misunderstanding. No apology. No thank you. Only silence. At last, she clicked the freeze button. The screen confirmed. Freeze mode activated. All transactions are now paused. Evelyn leaned back in her chair and exhaled. This was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming her dignity. Over the next 2 days, she said nothing as social media filled with photos of matching beach hats and smiling children. She kept the voice note from her youngest granddaughter close to her heart, the little girl excited about seeing sea turtles, and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby, but someone had to teach your parents the value of presence." Evelyn began making calls not to Michael or Laura, but to women she knew who had been overlooked, forgotten, or left behind. Carolyn, Beverly, Frances, Nora, Denise, women whose stories echoed her own. She planned a trip for them, not out of pity, but power. A week in Maui where they could be seen, heard, and honored. That night, Evelyn slept with the window open. The wind whispered like a secret finally spoken. Her family had their bags packed and boarding passes printed, ready to fly to paradise. But they had lost something more precious than a vacation, her trust. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the curtains as Evelyn sipped coffee from her favorite chipped mug, the same one Michael had once used to bring her breakfast in bed when he was a boy. She watched the unfolding scenes on social media, the family at the airport, laughter in the backseat of an Uber, excitement for the trip. 8 smiles, 8 seats. No room for her. Her phone buzzed again. Michael's voicemail. "Mom, please call me." She didn't answer. Instead, she opened her notebook, the one she'd used to jot down James's favorite songs and fishing recipes. She flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "The Forgotten Women." Names followed: Carolyn, Beverly, Frances, Nora, Denise. Each woman a story of strength, endurance, and invisibility. Each one deserving to be seen. She made the bookings herself this time. 1 villa, 6 women, 7 days of laughter, tears, and presence. No hashtags, no family-only captions. When they arrived, the villa perched above the ocean greeted them with the scent of salt and the soft sway of palm trees. Evelyn carefully placed James's framed photo in the center of the dining table. No one asked her to move it aside. That night, under hanging lights, with waves whispering through open doors, they shared stories. Carol laughed as she recounted taking the wrong bus and ending up miles from her wedding rehearsal. Beverly toasted to finally being somewhere she didn't have to clean. Frances cried at the view from her window. They didn't talk about who forgot them. They talked about who remembered. As the days unfolded, Evelyn felt a quiet strength growing inside her, the kind that comes from being truly seen and accepted. Around the table, the women shared not only memories, but also hopes and hard-earned wisdom. Each night, they lit a candle beside James's photo. One by one, each woman spoke a truth she wished someone had told her when she was younger. You are allowed to rest. Your story matters. You are not a burden. You are never invisible. On the last night, they walked barefoot along the shore. The stars hung low, close enough to touch. The water curled gently around their ankles, and the moon cast a silver glow on every wrinkle and scar, each a mark of a life lived fully. Evelyn looked around at these women who had given so much without asking for applause. She realized she hadn't just taken them on a vacation, she had brought them home. Home to themselves. Home to each other. The days after the trip were filled with quiet reflection. Evelyn returned to her home in Charleston, feeling lighter than she had in years. The echoes of laughter from Maui still lingered in her heart, a balm for wounds that had long festered. One morning, As she sat on her porch watching the sun rise over the harbor, her phone chimed with a new message. It was from Michael. "Hi, Mom. We're back. Things didn't go as planned, and maybe we messed up. Tanya says hi. We're trying to sort through a lot." Evelyn read the message slowly. There was no real apology, just a cautious attempt to reconnect, to clear the air. She set the phone down and looked out at the water. The tide rolled in and out, steady and sure, a reminder that time moves forward, carrying us with it. She didn't reply. Instead, she poured herself a cup of tea, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and smiled softly. She had found something they couldn't take away peace. Evelyn understood now that love doesn't always come with loud declarations or grand gestures. Sometimes, love is the quiet consistency of showing up for yourself, of choosing your own worth even when others fail to see it. She reflected on the years spent trying to be enough, a mother, a grandmother, a caregiver always giving, always hoping for recognition. But she realized that her value was never dependent on their acceptance. She picked up her journal and wrote, "Kindness breeds entitlement. So I erased that kindness and now I owe nothing to anyone. Not out of bitterness, but because I am finally free." Evelyn's smile was one of quiet triumph, not over others, but over the pain that once held her captive. Her journey was a reminder that the family we choose, the love we nurture within ourselves, can be the greatest legacy of all. If you're still watching, comment one so I know you're still with me. The days that followed the family's failed trip to Maui were some of the most transformative in Evelyn Parker's long life. The quiet that had once felt like a heavy cloak now became a soft blanket one that wrapped around her with comfort rather than suffocation. She woke up each morning not with the ache of loss, but with a budding sense of possibility. After years of bending and giving, trying to hold together a family that slowly slipped through her fingers, Evelyn finally began to understand what it meant to reclaim her own joy. It was not about grand vacations or expensive gifts, though those things had been her way of showing love. It was about finding meaning in moments that made her heart sing, no matter how small. One of the first mornings after the trip, she sat on the porch of her Charleston home, the salt air mingling with the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden below. The city was waking slowly, the distant murmur of ships in the harbor mixing with the chirp of birds. She cradled a warm cup of tea, its steam rising in the cool spring air, and watched the sun stretch its fingers over the horizon. For the first time in a long while, Evelyn didn't feel invisible. She felt seen not by her blood relatives who had cast her aside, but by the world around her and the new family she had chosen. That new family was made up of women who had endured the same pain, the same quiet exclusion. Carolyn, who had lost her husband but still held her head high at church gatherings. Beverly, whose children rarely visited, leaving her to care for a brother with dementia alone. Frances, who still wore her wedding ring decades after her husband's passing, refusing to let go of the love they shared. Nora, who spoke softly about the loneliness of aging and invisibility. And Denise, who had been a rock for her community despite never being acknowledged for it. Together, they formed a circle not perfect, not without scars, but strong and steady. Evelyn thought often about James during those days. She remembered his laughter, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and the deep love he had for the sea. She had promised herself that the Maui trip would be a bridge connecting past and present. But in truth, this circle of women was that bridge. They carried James's spirit in their shared stories and quiet moments of companionship. One afternoon, Evelyn invited them all over to her home. The sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns on the hardwood floor. The kitchen smelled of freshly baked bread and lavender, the scent James loved. They gathered around the large oak table Evelyn had refinished herself many years ago, the wood dark and warm beneath their hands. There were no forced smiles or polite small talk, just open hearts and honest conversation. Frances shared a story about a time she got lost on her way to her own wedding rehearsal, a mishap that could have ruined the day but instead became a funny memory she treasured. Beverly laughed as Carolyn tried to teach her how to hula, a flower tucked behind her ear adding a playful touch. Denise hummed a lullaby under her breath, a soothing melody she had sung to her grandchildren years ago. Evelyn listened, her heart full. These were the moments she had been waiting for, the kind of presence that made loneliness dissolve and gave rise to belonging. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they lit candles one by one, placing them carefully around a framed photo of James that Evelyn had brought from Maui. The soft flicker of flame reflected in their eyes, each woman carrying her own stories of love, loss, and resilience. Evelyn spoke softly. "We may not have been seen before, but here together we are a family. Not by blood, but by heart." Tears glistened on cheeks, and laughter mingled with the sound of the ocean breeze outside. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn found new rhythms. She volunteered at the local community center, offering tutoring for English learners, a role she had taken on during the long nights when she first began saving for the trip. She attended Bible study with her friends, finding strength in the shared faith and support. She began writing again, letters, journal entries, and stories. Her words captured the beauty and pain of her journey, the lessons learned from love and betrayal, and the joy found in choosing herself. One evening, sitting by the fire pit in her backyard, Evelyn reflected on the past months. The wound of exclusion still ached, but it was no longer a wound that defined her. Instead, it was a reminder of how far she had come. She understood now that love was not a transaction, not a ledger to be balanced with gifts and money. It was a choice, sometimes messy, sometimes painful, but always powerful. Evelyn thought about the words she had written in her journal. "Kindness breeds entitlement. So I erased that kindness, and now I owe nothing to anyone." That declaration was not born from bitterness, but from freedom. Freedom to be seen as she was, not as others wanted her to be. Freedom to create joy on her own terms. Freedom to embrace the quiet power of presence. Her phone chimed with a message, a simple note from Beverly, reminding her of an upcoming church potluck. Evelyn smiled and replied with a heart emoji. The path ahead was uncertain, but Evelyn no longer feared it. She had learned that family was more than blood. It was the friends who stayed, the moments shared without expectation, and the love that asked only to be received. As she closed her journal and looked out at the stars twinkling over Charleston's harbor, Evelyn whispered to the night, "This is just the beginning." The days flowed gently into weeks, and Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose stirring in her chest. The pain of rejection from her blood family, though still present, began to soften, replaced by the warmth of connections she had long overlooked. Each morning, she rose early to walk along the Charleston harbor, the sun casting golden ribbons across the water's surface. She treasured these quiet moments, the gentle lapping of the waves, the distant calls of seagulls, and the salty breeze that carried whispers of distant shores. It was during one of these walks that she realized how much life had to offer, beyond the confines of what she had once believed was her only family. The circle she had formed with Carolyn, Beverly, Frances, Nora, Denise, and the others was no longer just a group of friends. They had become sisters. A chosen family knit together by shared stories, laughter, and the resilient strength born from being overlooked. Evelyn's home had become a gathering place, a sanctuary where they could come to be seen and heard without judgment. The kitchen table, once a place of solitary meals and silent nights, now overflowed with the sounds of chatter, the clinking of teacups, and bursts of laughter that echoed through the halls. One afternoon, as she prepared a pot of jasmine tea, Evelyn felt a gentle tap at her door. It was Nora, her eyes bright despite the lines that time had traced across her face. "I brought you these," Nora said, holding out a small bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered from her garden. Evelyn's heart warmed as she accepted the gift. "Thank you, Nora. They're beautiful. It's just a little reminder," Nora replied softly, "that even when the world forgets us, there's still beauty around." They sat together on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sun dip lower in the sky. Evelyn shared stories of James, painting pictures of their early days, the honeymoon in Maui, the silly bedsheet he had worn like a cape when sunburned, the laughter that filled their small apartment. Her friends listened intently, their faces alight with empathy and understanding. "You were so lucky," Beverly remarked, reaching out to squeeze Evelyn's hand. "To have had that love." Evelyn smiled wistfully. "I was, and I carry it with me still. It's a light that never goes out." Their conversations often turned to memories, some joyful, others tinged with sorrow. Yet, through it all, a thread of resilience wove them together. They spoke of hopes for the future, plans to travel together, to support one another through the challenges of aging with grace and dignity. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years lift from her shoulders. She realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain, but about embracing new rhythms of life, ones filled with purpose, friendship, and self-respect. One evening, as the group gathered under the stars, Evelyn looked around at the faces glowing in the firelight. These women had endured countless hardships, yet here they were laughing, sharing, living. She reached into her bag and pulled out the lavender candle she had brought from Maui. With a match, she lit it carefully and placed it in the center of their circle. "This," she said, her voice steady, "is for all of us, for the strength it takes to keep going, for the love that never fades, and for the family we choose." The flames flickered softly, casting dancing shadows on their faces. In that moment, Evelyn felt a profound sense of belonging not defined by blood, but by heart. Later, alone in her room, Evelyn opened her journal and began to write. "Today I learned that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up, who holds your hand when you need it, who listens without judgment. I am no longer lost in the shadows. I am seen. I am loved." Her words flowed freely, a testament to the journey she had traveled from loneliness and exclusion to joy and connection. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Evelyn knew she would face it surrounded by love, chosen family, and the strength she had rediscovered within herself. And that was enough. The days after that summer brought new challenges, but Evelyn faced them with a quiet resolve that surprised even herself. She had learned that sometimes the hardest part of healing was not fighting to hold on, but having the strength to let go. Her relationship with Michael and Laura had dissolved into a series of missed calls, ignored messages, and unspoken regrets. They sent a few tentative texts, carefully worded apologies tangled with requests for money to cover debts from the canceled trip. Evelyn read them, folded the phone, and set it aside. She owed them nothing, not an explanation, not a refund, not forgiveness they were not ready to give. Instead, she focused on what mattered. Her friendships blossomed, and her days became filled with simple joys, cooking meals with Carolyn, attending church gatherings with Frances and Beverly, volunteering at the local library. These moments stitched together a new tapestry of life, colorful and vibrant, woven with threads of resilience and companionship. One afternoon, Evelyn received an invitation from the church to speak at a women's gathering. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready to share her story publicly. But something deep inside urged her forward, a quiet courage born of experience. Standing before the group of women, many older and some younger, Evelyn spoke from the heart. She told them about the pain of exclusion, the ache of invisibility, and the journey to reclaim her worth. She spoke of the power of choosing oneself, and of the family that could be built through love and understanding rather than blood alone. Her words resonated deeply, sparking tears and smiles, nods of recognition and heartfelt applause. After the talk, a young woman approached her, eyes shining. "Thank you for sharing. I've been feeling invisible in my own family, and your story gives me hope." Evelyn smiled, feeling the gift of connection passing from her to another. That evening, as the sun set over Charleston, Evelyn sat by her window, the soft glow of candlelight illuminating the room. She looked at the framed photo of James, his mischievous grin frozen in time, and whispered a prayer of gratitude. She had lost much, but she had gained more. Self-respect, true friendship, and a heart open to new beginnings. Evelyn knew her journey was far from over. There would be hard days ahead, moments of doubt and loneliness, but she had discovered a truth that would guide her always. Love begins with oneself. With a peaceful smile, she closed her eyes and let the memories of laughter, friendship, and hope carry her into the night. If you're still watching, comment one so I know you're still with me. The coming months brought a gentle rhythm to Evelyn's life. Her mornings often began with quiet walks along Charleston's waterfront, where the breeze carried the mingled scents of salt water and magnolia blooms. Each step along the weathered boardwalk felt like a step toward healing, toward embracing the life she had reclaimed. She spent afternoons with her chosen family, Carolyn, Beverly, Frances, Nora, and Denise, sharing meals, stories, and dreams. Their conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter and sometimes tears, but always with a profound sense of belonging. One day, as they gathered in Evelyn's cozy living room, Nora brought up a memory that touched them all. "When I was a girl," Nora began, "my grandmother used to tell me that the greatest gift we can give each other is present simply being there, truly listening and caring." The room fell quiet as each woman considered the truth of those words. Evelyn smiled softly and added, "For so long, I thought love was about grand gestures, trips, gifts, showing up in big ways. But I've learned it's often the small things that matter most. A kind word, a shared cup of tea, a hand held in silence." They nodded in agreement. Evelyn thought back to the years she had spent giving everything to a family that didn't see her. The heartbreak of being left out, the sting of exclusion, they had been profound. But through it all, she had found strength not in the things she lost, but in the love she could still give and receive. Her phone chimed softly. It was a message from her youngest granddaughter. "Grandma, we're going to see sea turtles." Evelyn pressed the play button, listening to the little voice full of excitement and wonder. She smiled, the warmth spreading through her chest. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "But sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the quietest moments." As the days grew warmer and spring blossomed fully into summer, Evelyn found herself at peace. She had learned that family was not always about who you were born to, but about those who chose to walk beside you. Her story was one of love and loss, but also of resilience and renewal. And as she looked out at the horizon, where the sky met the sea, Evelyn knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, surrounded by love, embraced by peace, and carrying a heart full of hope. In the quiet moments of early morning, Evelyn often found herself reflecting on the twists and turns her life had taken. The pain of exclusion and betrayal had left scars, but through time, she was learning that healing came not from holding on to anger, but from the strength to forgive, not for the sake of others, but for herself. She remembered the long nights spent pondering whether to pick up the phone and reach out to Michael or Laura. The words she would say danced just beyond reach apologies she wished they would offer, explanations they never gave. But she understood now that forgiveness was not about demanding these things. It was about freeing her own heart from the weight of resentment. Evelyn began attending a local support group for women who had experienced family estrangement. There, she met others whose stories mirrored her own women who had loved deeply but been met with silence or rejection. Together, they shared their journeys, finding solace in shared experience and strength in mutual understanding. One afternoon, as she sat in the sunlit room of the community center, Evelyn listened to a young woman recount her own painful story. When the woman finished, Evelyn spoke softly. "Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves," she said. "It doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the pain, but choosing to release it so it doesn't control us." Her words hung in the air, a quiet beacon for those who needed to hear them. Outside the meeting, Evelyn walked slowly along the garden path, the scent of blooming roses filling the air. She paused to touch the petals gently, feeling the softness beneath her fingers, a reminder that even after hardship, beauty could flourish. She thought about James and the love they had shared. That love had been a foundation, steady and enduring, teaching her that even when life shifted in unexpected ways, some things remained true. In the days that followed, Evelyn found herself writing more often letters not meant to be sent, reflections on her journey, affirmations of self-worth. Writing became a balm, a way to articulate the complexities of love, loss, and resilience. One evening, as she sat by the fire pit in her backyard, Evelyn struck a match and lit the lavender candle she had carried with her to Maui. The flame flickered and danced, casting soft shadows on the walls. She whispered a prayer of gratitude for the lessons learned, the friendships forged, and the peace she was beginning to know. The path ahead was still unfolding, but Evelyn faced it with open arms and a heart ready to embrace whatever came next. The summer sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over Charleston's historic streets. Evelyn Parker stood on her porch, the gentle breeze tugging softly at her shawl. Her eyes traced the familiar outline of the harbor, where boats bobbed quietly and seagulls wheeled overhead. It was a scene she had known for years, yet it felt different now, full of quiet promise rather than loneliness. The days since her gathering in Maui with Carolyn, Beverly, Frances, Nora, Denise, and the others had blossomed into a new chapter of her life, one rich with friendship and purpose. These women, each carrying their own stories of sacrifice and endurance, had become more than friends. They were sisters, a family she had chosen with her heart. Evelyn reflected on the journey that had led her here, from the painful text that had shattered her hopes for a family vacation to the moment she chose to reclaim her dignity and rewrite her story. It was a path lined with heartbreak, but also with healing. She remembered James, her beloved husband, and the many ways he had shaped her life. His laughter, warm and vibrant, echoed in her memory. She had carried his photo with her to Maui, placing it at the center of their gathering. Each candle lit around it symbolized not just his memory, but the strength of love that endured beyond absence. Now, as Evelyn sat with her chosen family, sharing meals and stories in the soft light of her home, she understood something profound. Legacy is not measured by wealth or possessions, but by the love we give and the lives we touch. One afternoon, as they gathered for tea, Frances shared a story about her granddaughter. "She asked me once," Frances said, "what it means to leave a legacy. I told her it's the kindness you pass on, the strength you show, and the memories you create." Evelyn nodded, her eyes misty. "It's also about forgiveness," she added. "Not because we forget the pain, but because holding on to it only weighs us down." The group fell into thoughtful silence, each woman touched by the weight and grace of Evelyn's words. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn found herself more engaged with her community. She volunteered at the library, teaching literacy classes to adults. She organized small outings with her friends, picnics in the park, visits to the botanical gardens, and quiet afternoons by the ocean. Each moment was a thread in the tapestry of her renewed life, woven with purpose and joy. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of pink and purple, Evelyn received a letter. It was from Michael. The letter was cautious, tinged with regret. He spoke of the mistakes made, the pain caused, and a desire to rebuild bridges that had been broken. There was no grand apology, but an opening, a possibility for healing. Evelyn held the letter close, feeling the familiar ache, but also a new sense of peace. She knew forgiveness was a journey, not a destination. It was something she could offer when she was ready, on her own terms. That night, she lit the lavender candle once more, its flames steady and warm. She whispered a prayer not just for herself, but for her family, both chosen and given. Her story was no longer defined by exclusion, but by resilience, love, and the courage to embrace new beginnings. As she looked out at the stars shimmering over Charleston, Evelyn felt a quiet strength settle within Hera, strength born of survival, kindness, and the enduring power of the human spirit. And with that, she smiled, knowing that the best chapters of her life were still to come. The dawn broke softly over Charleston, its golden light spilling through the lace curtains of Evelyn Parker's bedroom. She stirred awake, feeling the gentle warmth of the morning sun on her face. It was a new day, not just in the calendar, but in her heart. The journey she had traveled from the pain of rejection to the freedom of self-love had transformed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. She rose slowly, the familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet a comforting reminder of home. In the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of lavender from the candle burning softly on the windowsill. As she sipped her coffee, Evelyn thought about the family she had lost and the family she had found. The faces of Carolyn, Beverly, Frances, Nora, Denise, all women who had shared her pain and laughter, floated gently in her mind. She smiled, remembering the evenings spent around the fire pit, the soft flicker of candlelight illuminating their faces as they spoke of dreams, regrets, and hope. Her phone chimed softly, a message from Nora. "Looking forward to our picnic this weekend. Can't wait to see you." Evelyn's heart warmed. These simple connections had become her lifeline, each one a thread weaving a tapestry of belonging and love. Later that week, as she and her friends gathered beneath the sprawling oak tree in the city park, laughter bubbled freely. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the grass with patches of gold. They shared homemade treats, stories of their youth, and plans for future adventures. There was no judgment here, no pretense, just the pure joy of companionship. Evelyn felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She had learned that family was not defined solely by blood, but by the hearts willing to hold yours. That evening, as she walked along the harbor, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, Evelyn paused to watch the tide roll in and out. The rhythm of the waves echoed the cycles of her own life, times of turmoil followed by calm, loss followed by renewal. She whispered a quiet promise to herself, to cherish each moment, to nurture the love she had found, and to embrace the unknown with courage and grace. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Evelyn felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. The past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She was ready for whatever came next. The stars above Charleston twinkled softly as Evelyn Parker sat quietly on her porch, a gentle breeze brushing through the trees. The lavender candle flickered beside her, its light steady and warm, a symbol of the journey she had walked, from heartbreak to healing. She thought about all the women who had shared this path with her. Carolyn, Beverly, Frances, Nora, Denise, each carrying scars and stories, each shining with a resilience born of enduring love and loss. Evelyn smiled softly as she remembered the night they all gathered in Maui, surrounded by the sea's whisper and candlelight's glow. That trip had been more than a vacation. It was a reclamation of dignity, a gathering of chosen family bound not by blood but by heart. She had learned that family is not always who we are born to, but who chooses to stand beside us, who sees us, hears us, and loves us unconditionally. Her heart was full, not with bitterness or regret, but with peace and gratitude. In the quiet of the evening, Evelyn reached for her journal and wrote, "No winter lasts forever. No spring skips its turn." Those words echoed the truth she had come to know. After seasons of pain, of being forgotten and dismissed, she had blossomed anew. Love had shown her that the greatest strength lies in kindness tempered with boundaries, in giving without losing oneself, and in embracing the freedom that comes with self-respect. Evelyn's story was one of many untold of mothers and grandmothers who had loved fiercely yet been cast aside, of women who had found power not in holding on to the past, but in writing new chapters with courage and grace. She closed her journal and looked out at the horizon, where the first light of dawn was beginning to chase away the night. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready to live fully, love deeply, and be seen, truly seen for who she was. She smiled, feeling the warmth of the candle beside her and the hope that filled her soul. And with that, Evelyn Parker embraced the dawn of her new life, a life defined not by absence, but by the enduring power of presence. As Evelyn's journey shows us, forgiveness is not about forgetting the wounds or excusing the hurt caused by others. It is a gift we give ourselves, a sacred act that frees our hearts from the weight of bitterness and pain. In the Christian tradition, forgiveness is seen as a path to healing, echoing the teaching that to forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. Through forgiving, Evelyn found peace not by condoning what was done, but by reclaiming her dignity and opening her heart to new beginnings. Her story reminds us that forgiveness is an act of strength, a choice to release anger and embrace grace. Dear listeners, in your own lives, when faced with hurt or betrayal, remember that forgiveness is a journey worth taking not for others, but to restore your own soul. If this story has touched your heart, please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your story could be the light someone else needs. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate resilience, hope, and the enduring power of forgiveness. Next, we have a story that's just as powerful. This is a story about resilience and reclaiming dignity in the face of abandonment by those closest to us. Evelyn Harper's journey reveals the strength it takes to rewrite your own story after betrayal and loss, and how true family can be the one you choose, not just the one you're born into. It's about finding hope, healing, and self-worth even when the world turns its back. Before we dive into her story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. Evelyn stood quietly in the bustling Nashville International Airport, clutching a small, worn itinerary in her hand. Around her, travelers hurried past with rolling suitcases and bright smiles, the chatter of voices and the steady calls over the loudspeaker filling the large, echoing terminal. But for Evelyn, the noise was a distant blur, overshadowed by a heavy stillness settling in her chest. She felt invisible, abandoned in a place meant for comings and goings, yet somehow stuck between both. Earlier that day, Michael Hersona and his wife, Laura, had dropped her off at the airport without a return ticket, without her luggage, without a proper goodbye. "We only bought you a one-way ticket," Laura said with an unsettling calm as she pulled her designer suitcase behind her and headed for the first-class lounge. "You'll figure out your way back." There was no warmth in her voice, no glance that said, "I love you" or "I'm sorry." Just a dismissive smile, the kind that people wear when they think they're doing you a favor by telling you a harsh truth. Evelyn watched as they disappeared into the crowd, the echo of their footsteps swallowed by the hum of airport life. She was left standing alone, clutching her thin sweater wrapped around her shoulders against the chill of the air-conditioned terminal. Her own belongings amounted to little more than the small purse she held close to her heart and the itinerary that was quickly becoming meaningless. No luggage, no boarding pass, no money beyond a few bills tucked away inside that worn purse. The sting of abandonment wasn't new to Evelyn. She had felt it before, once as a child, waiting for a father who never returned from a short trip. But today's betrayal was sharper, more painful because it came from her own family. The people who should have loved her most had instead left her stranded in a sea of strangers. She took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. Tears threatened but never fell. The last 2 months had been a storm of grief and change. Just 8 weeks ago, she had stood beside her husband, James Harper, as he took his final breath after more than 4 decades together. A sudden stroke had stolen him away in the quiet morning rain, leaving a silence in their home that echoed louder than any noise ever had. The funeral was a somber affair under gloomy skies. Friends and family came and went, offering words of sympathy and kind gestures. But Evelyn soon learned that grief wore many faces, and some of those faces belonged to those she thought she could trust. Her family, eager to help, had planned a healing trip to Florida, chance to breathe fresh air and escape the heaviness of loss. Evelyn, desperate for connection, had agreed. She had even sold the delicate pearl necklace James had given her on their 50th anniversary to help cover the costs, wanting to contribute to what was supposed to be a family effort. But the trip was not what it seemed. Evelyn had assumed they would travel together, sharing meals and memories, healing as a family. Instead, she was shuffled through the airport like an inconvenience, a burden they wanted to unload as quickly as possible. At the security checkpoint, Evelyn's worst fears were confirmed. The agent scanned her ticket and frowned. "Ma'am, this return flight has been canceled. We don't have a record of a return ticket for you." The words hit her like a cold wave. She blinked, hoping for some mistake. When she looked up, her son and daughter-in-law were already disappearing through the gates, their figures swallowed by the sea of travelers. She felt the weight of the moment settle deep into her bones. The humiliation of being left behind by her own family was a pain she had never expected to face. Memories flooded back, memories of a little girl waiting for a father who never came home, a wound thought to be long healed. Now, decades later, it reopened with a sharpness that took her breath away. She didn't cry. Instead, Evelyn drew herself up, squared her shoulders, and dug into her purse for a small, battered envelope. Inside was a business card, Jonathan Wells, attorney. A trusted friend of James's, a man who had promised to be there if ever she needed help. With hands that trembled only slightly, Evelyn dialed the number. When Jonathan answered, she spoke clearly and without hesitation. "I need to update my will, and I need to do it now." That call was a turning point, not just in legal terms, but in Evelyn's own sense of self. She was no longer a forgotten mother left behind in an airport terminal. She was a woman ready to reclaim her voice and her future. As she sat on the cold bench near Gate B-22, The world bustled past her. Parents ushered their children, couples embraced, and travelers rushed toward their next adventure. Yet Evelyn felt a quiet calm settle over her. The betrayal of abandonment had hurt deeply, but it would not define her. There was strength in the silence, in the decision to stand tall even when the world seemed to turn away. She was no longer just a woman alone in an airport. She was Evelyn Harperwife, mother, survivor, and her story was just beginning. The rain was still falling softly when James Harper took his last breath. Evelyn sat beside him, holding his hand, feeling the steady beat of their years together slip away like the gentle patter on the windowpane. 42 years of marriage, 42 years of shared mornings, whispered conversations, and the kind of love that thrived in small, quiet moments rather than grand declarations. James wasn't a man of many words, but Evelyn knew him better than anyone. His laugh was low and warm, a rare sound that lit up even the darkest days. She remembered how he'd hum tuneless melodies while fixing the leaky kitchen faucet or patiently teaching their son Michael to ride his bike. They built a life together, not a perfect one, but one full of ordinary joys and the kind of partnership that felt unshakable. And then, suddenly, it was gone. The house felt emptier in the days that followed. James's favorite chair sat by the window, untouched, as if waiting for him to return. His shoes remained by the door. His jacket still hung on the coat rack. Evelyn would catch herself turning to speak to him, only to remember he wasn't there anymore. Grief settled in like a heavy fog, clouding the bright memories and dulling her senses. It was in this fragile state that her family suggested the tripe a chance to step away from the sorrow and breathe fresh air. Evelyn wanted to believe in the possibility of healing, in the chance to reconnect. She wanted to believe that Michael and Laura cared enough to include her, that they valued the years James and she had spent building their family. But the reality was starkly different. From the moment they arrived in Florida, Evelyn sensed the distance. Michael and Laura seemed distracted, their conversations punctuated by phone calls and whispered comments she couldn't quite hear. They had separate rooms, and Evelyn was given the smallest corner of the house a guest room that felt more like an afterthought. Meals were eaten in silence, or hurried conversations about schedules and plans, with Evelyn often left alone. The vibrant, loving family she had imagined was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a growing sense of alienation, a reminder that she was no longer part of their world. One afternoon, while Michael and Laura were out, Evelyn wandered to the beach. The warm sand slipped through her fingers as she sat watching the waves crash, the endless horizon a stark contrast to the tight knots in her chest. She clutched the pearl necklace James had given her years ago, a fragile link to a life that felt both distant and precious. That necklace had been sold months earlier to help pay for the trip, a sacrifice Evelyn made without hesitation. She wanted to be part of something, to hold on to family, even as the ties frayed. But family was not what she found. The moment at the airport shattered whatever illusions remained. To be dropped off with a one-way ticket, no luggage, no return transit was more than abandonment. It was a statement. They were done, including her. As Evelyn sat back in the airport terminal, she realized something profound. This wasn't about money or logistics. It was about control, about deciding who belonged and who didn't. And she wasn't going to accept that judgment quietly. She reached into her purse and took out the envelope with Jonathan Wells's card again. She dialed the number, feeling the weight of every second pass as it rang. When he answered, she found her voice steady. "I need to update my will, and I need to do it immediately." Jonathan's calm, reassuring tone was a balm to her frayed nerves. He promised to help her reclaim what was hers, legally and emotionally. That evening, Evelyn lay awake, memories swirling. She remembered the first time James had slipped the gold band onto her finger, the promise in his eyes as he whispered, 10 years, and then 10 more. How they'd danced in their living room, barefoot and laughing, the music filling every corner. She thought of the nights they'd spent dreaming of a future, raising their son, building a home filled with love and laughter. She thought of Michael as a boy curious, energetic, full of promise, and she thought of the family they had hoped to become. Now, that family felt like a stranger, a ghost she could no longer reach. But Evelyn was not a woman to give up. With each breath, She promised herself she would fight not with anger or bitterness, but with quiet strength. She would write a new chapter, one where she was seen, valued, and respected. Because no matter the losses, she was still here. And this was her story to tell. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. The morning light streamed softly through the thin curtains of Evelyn's modest motel room. Outside, the world went on, cars humming by, people rushing to their destinations, unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside a woman who had just been cast aside by those she loved most. Evelyn sat at the small table, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, staring at the papers spread before her. The legal documents bore her name, her will, her estate plans, but the names once etched there in ink, her son and daughter-in-law, were now marked for removal. Instead, a new beneficiary took their place. Elder Haven, a non-profit dedicated to protecting vulnerable seniors like herself. She traced the lines with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of years lift slowly from her shoulders. It wasn't revenge that drove her far from it. It was justice. It was reclaiming the dignity that had been so casually stripped away. It was a declaration that she was no longer a shadow lurking at the edges of her family's life. As she signed her name, a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. This was more than paperwork. It was a rebirth. Later that day, Evelyn stepped into Willow Grove Independent Living, a place she had once only visited with James on quiet afternoons, imagining a future she never thought she'd need. The hallways smelled faintly of lemon and fresh linen. Soft jazz music floated from the common room, mingling with the gentle murmur of conversation. A woman with kind eyes greeted her at the front desk. "Welcome, Mrs. Harper. We've been expecting you." For the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt seen. Days turned into weeks as she found a new rhythm. She joined a book club, laughed at the playful banter of new friends, and even took up watercolor painting again, the hobby she'd once shared with James. With every brushstroke, she painted away the sorrow and painted in hope. She was no longer just a widow or a forgotten mother. She was Evelina woman, choosing her own family and crafting a life of meaning and joy. When a gentle knock came at her door one evening, it was Helen, a fellow resident with a sharp wit and a heart of gold. They sat together, sharing stories and tea, weaving a friendship that reminded Evelyn of the power of connection beyond bloodlines. But life's challenges were never far away. One afternoon, her phone buzzed insistently calls and messages from Michael and Laura, desperate apologies and pleas. Yet Evelyn remained silent. Her peace, not something she was ready to trade. She had chosen her path, and in choosing it, found a strength that no abandonment could take away. Evelyn woke to the gentle hum of morning sunlight filtering through her window at Willow Grove. The familiar scent of coffee wafted from the common area downstairs, mingling with the soft murmur of residents greeting the new day. For the first time in months, she felt a quiet peace settle within her chesta, peace born not from forgetting the past, but from accepting it and choosing to move forward. The days here were different from anything Evelyn had known in years. Instead of feeling invisible and discarded, she was part of a community that welcomed her with warmth and respect. She joined a watercolor class on Thursday afternoons, a small gathering of residents eager to explore colors and brushstrokes. As Evelyn lifted her brush to the paper, memories of James surfaced not as a pang of loss, but as a tender smile shared between old friends. In the evenings, she attended the book club, where laughter was as plentiful as the stories shared. Helen, ever the sharp observer, often teased Evelyn about her meticulous notes and thoughtful insights. "You've got the soul of a teacher, even now," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. Evelyn found herself opening up in ways she hadn't imagined. She shared stories of her youth, her marriage, and the heartbreak that had led her here. And in doing so, she discovered that she was not alone, that many had faced their own trials, their own moments of being left behind. Back in Tennessee, Michael and Laura struggled to come to terms with the changes Evelyn had set in motion. The once distant mother now seemed like a force to be reckoned with. Calls and messages grew more frequent, tinged with regret and desperation. But Evelyn's silence was deliberately a boundary drawn not from anger, but from self-respect. One afternoon, a letter arrived at Willow Grove. It was from Michael, filled with apologies and pleas for reconciliation. Evelyn read it carefully, feeling the familiar stirrings of love and pain intertwined. She folded the letter gently, placing it beside a small painting she had just completed. A vibrant scene of a sunrise over the Tennessee hills. She wasn't ready to respond, not yet. Healing took time, and her journey was hers alone. Instead, Evelyn reached for her journal, pen in hand, ready to write the next chapter of her story, one defined not by betrayal, but by courage, hope, and the enduring power of choosing oneself. Evelyn Harper never imagined that her twilight years would become a testament to her own strength, a chapter written not by others, but by her own hand. As the days at Willow Grove unfolded, she embraced a freedom she had long forgotten, a chance to rediscover who she was beyond the roles of wife, mother, or caretaker. Her mornings began with quiet walks through the gardens, where sunlight filtered through the leaves and birds sang melodies that seemed to speak directly to her soul. She carried with her a small journal, filling its pages with memories, hopes, and reflections. Each word was a stitch, mending the fabric of her life, woven from threads of loss and resilience. One afternoon, during a watercolor class, Evelyn found herself painting a scene from Memoria, modest farmhouse nestled among rolling hills, sunlight casting golden hues over fields that stretched to the horizon. The colors blended softly on the paper, capturing a sense of peace she had yearned for but seldom found. Helen, sitting beside her, glanced over with a smile. "You've captured something beautiful there," she said warmly. "It's like you're painting your own hope." Evelyn nodded, feeling a tear slip down her cheek, not from sorrow but from a profound recognition. "I'm learning that hope isn't about forgetting what's lost. It's about choosing to grow, even in the soil of pain." The friendships she forged at Willow Grove became pillars of support. They shared stories of love and hardship, laughter and tears, and the quiet understanding that comes from walking similar paths. Evelyn's heart, once heavy with grief and betrayal, began to lighten. Meanwhile, life beyond the walls of Willow Grove continued to stir. Michael and Laura's persistent attempts to reconnect reminded Evelyn of the complexities of family ties, the tangled threads of duty, regret, and longing. Letters arrived sporadically, each one a mixture of apology and explanation. They spoke of mistakes made, of misunderstandings, and of a desire to heal. Evelyn read them carefully, weighing her feelings with the wisdom born from years of heartache and hope. She chose to respond with honesty and grace, setting boundaries that protected her peace while leaving room for forgiveness. The journey was neither quick nor easy, but with every step, Evelyn reclaimed not only her narrative but her right to define her own family. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn often sat by the window, looking out over the garden. She thought of James, of the life they had built, and of the legacy she now carried forward, not in possessions or titles, but in the courage to stand tall and the willingness to love anew. Her story was no longer one of abandonment. It was a story of rebirth, resilience, and the unyielding power of a woman who chose to write her own ending. Evelyn felt the gentle embrace of morning sunlight as it streamed through the window of her cozy apartment at Willow Grove. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the quiet rustle of pages as she settled into her favorite chair with a well-worn book. For the first time in a long while, there was a sense of calm, not the hollow quiet of loneliness, but a peaceful stillness born from acceptance and newfound purpose. Life at Willow Grove was different from anything she had known before. It was a place where respect and dignity were more than just words. They were woven into every interaction. The staff greeted her by name, remembering her preferences, and the residents became a patchwork family, bound by shared stories and mutual support. Evelyn had found joy in small things, a morning yoga class that stretched her aching muscles, laughter-filled afternoons in the communal kitchen where stories were swapped over cups of tea, and quiet evenings spent painting delicate watercolors that captured the changing seasons outside her window. Helen remained a steadfast friend, her sharp wit and compassionate heart a balm for Evelyn's occasional doubts and fears. Together, they navigated the complexities of aging with grace and humor, reminding each other that while the past shaped them, it did not define their future. Meanwhile, the echoes of the past occasionally resurfaced in the form of letters and calls from Michael and Laura. Their voices carried tones of regret and longing, attempts at reconciliation that Evelyn met with measured grace. She listened, acknowledged, but guarded her peace fiercely. One afternoon, as she prepared for a community art exhibit featuring resident works, Evelyn reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain of betrayal, the weight of loss, and the sting of rejection had all been fierce storms. Yet, through them she had discovered an inner strength she never knew she possessed. Her life was no longer dictated by others' choices or actions. She had planted new roots of resilience, self-love, and a family built on genuine connection. As she stood before her painting at the exhibit, a vibrant depiction of a sunlit garden, Evelyn felt a quiet pride. This was her story, her legacy, not one written in shadows, but in light. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. Evelyn Harper had learned that strength often came in quiet moments, in the decision to say no, to protect one's peace, and to choose oneself even when the world expected otherwise. Life at Willow Grove had taught her this lesson in abundance. She was no longer the woman left stranded at an airport, abandoned by those she called family. Instead, she was a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to set boundaries, even when it meant standing firm against those she once loved. The phone calls from Michael and Laura continued, though less frequently. Each time, Evelyn listened with an open heart but a guarded soul. She had forgiven, but she would not forget. Forgiveness was a gift she gave herself, a path to healing, not a door left wide open to be walked through without respect. One afternoon, Helen sat beside her in the common room, a knowing look in her eyes. "You're doing well," she said softly, "stronger than many who come through these doors." Evelyn smiled, feeling the warmth of friendship that had blossomed between them. "It's a process," she replied. "Every day, I choose peace over pain." They spoke about family, those ties that bind and sometimes constrict. Evelyn shared her hopes that one day bridges could be rebuilt, but only if the foundation was respect and understanding. Meanwhile, the community around her flourished. Evelyn found herself leading a workshop on creative writing, encouraging others to share their stories and find their voices. It was a role that brought her joy and purpose, connecting her with others navigating their own paths of loss and renewal. As autumn leaves began to fall, Evelyn received a letter that made her pause, an invitation from Michael to meet and talk. The words were tentative, tinged with regret and a desire to understand. She folded the letter carefully, a mixture of emotions swirling within. Evelyn knew that choosing to engage would mean vulnerability, but it was also a chance to redefine what family meant on her own terms. With steady resolve, she wrote back, agreeing to meet but on her own conditions. Honesty, respect, and the space to heal. The chapter ahead was uncertain, but Evelyn Harper was ready to face it, armed with the quiet strength of a woman who had reclaimed her story. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the small cafe where Evelyn and Michael agreed to meet. It was a neutral ground, neither the sanctuary of Willow Grove nor the house that once held so many memories. Evelyn arrived early, her hands folded calmly in her lap, heart steady despite the storm of emotions swirling beneath. Michael walked in moments later, his face a mixture of apprehension and hope. The years of silence and distance hung heavily between them, yet neither spoke immediately. Instead, they settled into the quiet, the kind that only long-separated family members can share. Finally, Michael broke the stillness. "Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. For how things happened. For how I treated you." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I know, Michael, and I appreciate that. But apologies aren't enough on their own." He looked down, his voice faltering. "I don't know how to fix this. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong." She reached out, placing a hand gently on his. "Fixing takes time. Trust takes time. And healing is a choice." Their conversation wove through memories, regrets, and hopes. Evelyn shared how deeply hurt she had been, but also how she had found strength in choosing to love herself first. Michael listened, finally understanding the weight of his actions. As the evening deepened, they spoke of family, not just the ties of blood, but the bonds forged through respect, honesty, and care. Evelyn expressed her willingness to rebuild, but only if those foundations were real. When they parted, it was with tentative smiles and promises to try, not to erase the past, but to build something new upon it. Back at Willow Grove, Evelyn felt a quiet peace settle over her. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she was hopeful not because of what others might do, but because of what she had chosen for herself. Her story was hers to write, and she was ready for whatever came next. The crisp morning air at Willow Grove carried the promise of change. Evelyn Harper stepped outside her apartment, the soft crunch of fallen leaves beneath her feet matching the steady beat of her heart. Each step was a testament to the journey she had taken from the shadow of abandonment to the light of self-discovery. Her days were now filled with purpose and connection. She had become a familiar face in the community garden, tending to blooms alongside friends who had become family. The laughter that echoed through the courtyard was a balm, a reminder that life could still surprise with moments of joy. Evelyn had started a weekly storytelling circle, inviting residents to share memories and lessons learned. It was a space where voices once silenced found strength, and where the past was honored without holding the present hostage. One afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the trees, Michael visited Willow Grove. The visit was unplanned but welcomed. They walked slowly through the gardens, words flowing easier than before. Evelyn shared stories of the garden's beginnings, the meanings behind each plant, and how tending to life helped her heal. Michael listened, the distance between them narrowing with every shared moment. He began to see not just a mother, but a woman renewed resilient, vibrant, and whole. As the sun set, casting warm hues over the sky, Evelyn felt a deep gratitude. The path hadn't been easy, but it had led her here to a place where she was not defined by loss or rejection, but by strength and choice. Her legacy was no longer about what was taken, but about what she continued to give to herself, to those around her, and to the story she still had the power to tell. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. Evelyn's days at Willow Grove unfolded like chapters in a book she was finally ready to read with curiosity, courage, and open arms. The community had become her refuge, a place where she was seen and valued, not for her past, but for the person she was becoming. She often thought about the family she had lost, the son and daughter-in-law who had turned their backs on her, the memories they shared, and the hopes that had been shattered. Yet in the quiet moments, Evelyn understood that family wasn't solely defined by blood. It was about love, respect, and the choice to stand by one another. Her friendship with Helen grew deeper. They spent afternoons knitting, sharing recipes, and reminiscing about lives rich with stories both joyful and painful. Helen's gentle reminders that strength could be found in vulnerability and that healing was a journey, not a destination, became a guiding light. Evelyn also found purpose in mentoring younger residents, offering guidance and encouragement drawn from a lifetime of experience. Through their eyes, she rediscovered the beauty of connection and the power of legacy. Letters from Michael and Laura continued to arrive, their tones softer, more reflective. Evelyn responded with kindness, setting clear boundaries that honored her peace. The door to reconciliation was open, but only when built on genuine change. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn sat by her window, a warm cup of tea in hand. She thought about the path that had brought her here, the pain, the loss, the courage to say no, and the new family she had chosen. Her story was no longer about abandonment. It was about resilience, love, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Evelyn often wandered through the community garden at Willow Grove, her fingers brushing gently over the leaves and petals that blossomed under her care. Each plant was a symbol, a testament to the resilience that had carried her through the darkest days and into this new chapter. The garden had become more than just a patch of earth. It was a living reminder that life, no matter how battered, could still grow and flourish. Evelyn saw in the vibrant blooms the same spirit that had refused to be broken, that had chosen hope over despair. She began leading a small group in creating a therapeutic garden space for women who, like her, had faced loss, betrayal, and loneliness. Together, they planted flowers and herbs, nurturing not only the soil but their spirits. Evelyn's story became a source of inspiration, shared quietly among the residents and staff, a reminder that strength could be cultivated, that healing was possible. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Michael. It was longer this time, filled with reflections and a tentative hope for rebuilding what had been lost. Evelyn read it carefully, her heart open but guarded. She penned a thoughtful reply, emphasizing the importance of respect, understanding, and the time needed to rebuild trust. She reaffirmed her commitment to the life she was building and the family she was choosing, the one who saw her, honored her, and stood beside her. As the sun set over the hills of Tennessee, Evelyn felt a deep sense of peace. Her legacy was not the possessions left behind or the ties severed, but the seeds of hope and strength she planted for herself, for others, and for the stories yet to be told. The golden light of a late autumn afternoon filled the room where Evelyn sat quietly, penning letters to those who had once been part of her life. Forgiveness was a word heavy with meaning, one she had wrestled with deeply since her journey began. She understood now that forgiveness was not about excusing the pain or forgetting the wounds. It was about freeing herself from the burden of anger and bitterness, about opening her heart to peace and renewal. Evelyn wrote to Michael and Laura with honesty and grace, sharing her feelings without accusation, expressing a hope that they too could find healing and understanding. Her words were a bridge, fragile, yet strong enough to span the distance between them. At Willow Grove, Evelyn continued to build a life rich with connection. She led workshops on storytelling and art therapy, helping others find their voices and express their journeys. The community became a tapestry of shared experiences, woven with threads of compassion and resilience. One evening, as she looked out over the garden she helped nurture, Evelyn felt a profound gratitude. Life had given her a second chance to reclaim her story, to embrace love in new forms, and to build a family chosen by the heart. Her past was a chapter she honored, but it no longer defined her. Evelyn Harper was a woman reborn, standing tall in the quiet strength of forgiveness and hope. Evelyn Harper had come to understand that life's greatest gifts often emerge from the ashes of loss. At Willow Grove, each new day brought with it a promise, a chance to begin again, to write a new chapter, unburdened by past hurts. The community around her blossomed with stories of resilience and hope. Neighbors became friends, friends became chosen family, and together they shared laughter, tears, and the quiet moments that knit hearts together. Evelyn found herself at the center of this tapestry, not by seeking it, but by embracing it. She volunteered to organize monthly gatherings where residents could share their journeys, celebrate milestones, and support one another. Her art flourished as well. The watercolor paintings she created reflected the vibrant hues of her new life, soft pastels of dawn, fiery oranges of sunset, and the deep greens of renewal. Though the letters from Michael and Laura continued, Evelyn's responses grew gentler, more open. She was willing to listen, to understand, but only on terms that honored her peace and dignity. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, Evelyn sat with a cup of tea, feeling the warmth seep into her hands and soul. She thought of James, of the love they had shared, and of the strength that had carried her through the darkest nights. Her legacy was no longer a weight, but a beacon light for herself and for those who walked beside her. Evelyn Harper was no longer just a survivor. She was a beacon of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of choosing to live fully, no matter the past. Evelyn Harper sat quietly by the window of her apartment at Willow Grove, the soft afternoon light casting gentle shadows across her face. Outside, the garden bloomed in vibrant colors, a living testament to growth, resilience, and renewal. Each flower seemed to mirror her own journey, from the depths of loneliness and betrayal to the light of self-discovery and peace. Her story was not just about loss or abandonment. It was about the courage it took to stand up, to reclaim her voice, and to write a new chapter filled with hope and dignity. This was her story, a story not only of survival but of transformation. For too long, Evelyn had been defined by the roles others assigned her: the dutiful wife, the devoted mother, the forgotten elder. But now, she was more than those titles. She was a woman who had faced the harshest storms and emerged with grace and strength. Her choice to change her will, to redirect her legacy to Elder Haven, was not made in anger or spite, but in a quiet declaration of justice and care. It was a message that no one and oh, matter their age or vulnerability, should ever feel invisible or unvalued. At Willow Grove, Evelyn found a family that saw her true worth. She shared laughter and stories, taught watercolor classes, and led workshops that encouraged others to tell their own her story. Through art, writing, and community, she helped weave a tapestry of voices united by resilience and hope. The letters and calls from Michael and Laura continued, their tones softer now, filled with reflection and regret. Evelyn listened, chose forgiveness, but never forgot the lessons that hardship had taught her. Forgiveness was her gift to herself, a bridge to peace, not a door left open to be walked over. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, Evelyn felt a profound gratitude. Her past, with all its pain and betrayal, had shaped her but did not define her. She was the author of her own fate, the keeper of her own legacy. Her story was a beacon to those who felt lost, a reminder that it is never too late to reclaim one's dignity and joy. She knew that many might sit alone, bearing invisible wounds, wondering if there was a way forward. To them, she would say, "You are not alone. Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. And like Evelyn, you can choose to stand tall, to build a life of meaning and connection." If her story has touched your heart, if you've felt the sting of loss or the warmth of renewal, please share your thoughts below. Your voice might be the light someone else needs in their darkest hour. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories that celebrate resilience, hope, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Because every story is worth telling, and every life is worth honoring.